My name's Joy Crookes. I'm a musician. I'm from London. I'm a daughter, sister, cousin. But yeah, that's it. How did my first musical steps look? Yeah, confused. It took a lot of working myself out. It still takes a lot of working out. But it was exciting, and you know, when you do one thing that's brand new, it's like, wow, this is so fun, and then another thing comes in and that's brand new, and constantly having first times is really fun and interesting. My dad's musical knowledge was super important. You know, he made me interested in music. He played me everything, like he said, from Kendrick Lamar to Gregory Isaacs to Sinead O'Connor to everyone. So yeah, it was super important, and I take influence from those artists, even though they're very different genres. I take influence from those artists to this day. Probably I'm massively influenced by Kendrick Lamar. I mean, it doesn't sound like I am, but I love how honest he is and how complicated but also simple his music is. He has so many different characters in his work, but they're all kind of reflections of himself, which I find really interesting. And probably Van Morrison, because of the way he sings, and he has a very painful voice, and I like that. There wasn't like one day when I was like, ooh. I think just over time, you know, writing more, and then when I wasn't writing, when I'm not writing, I feel quite bad, or I feel like something's wrong. So it's like an emotional and mental practice for me, let alone like a business or a career. I think when you're a 15-year-old girl, you feel like you know what you want, and maybe you don't, and maybe you do, but I think the general consensus of people around you is that you need to be molded into something. And I knew I had to experiment, but I knew I didn't want to be told what to do creatively, because they're two very different things. When you're experimenting, it's fun and it's interesting, and you are allowed room to try things out. But when you're being molded into something, you feel trapped and you feel scared, and you feel like sometimes you feel like you have to follow what people say because you're young and because you haven't got experience. But then your instinct is saying, no, try something new, you don't want to do this, try something else out. So it's very conflicting when you're that young to be in those kinds of rooms and those kinds of environments with people. I became a complete bitch. I'm joking, I didn't, maybe a little bit. But I think I started to understand from experimenting who I was more, and then I was like able to navigate situations and writing sessions and go, hey, I want to do a song like this today, and then they can't mold me because I come in with a mold anyway. I definitely wasn't thinking of the women in the world. I was just thinking of bad shit, like the fact that Trump had been elected, like the fact that my mother may have not felt as free as she could have felt in her life because of systematic racism and the social kind of just society in general, and how they treat certain groups of people. And it was very hard to put that and compartmentalize that into a song. But we had this incredible conversation, the woman I wrote it with, and she got up and she was like, right, I'm leaving, I'm gonna have a glass of wine. She asked me loads of questions about my upbringing, about people I love, about how I felt, about how they may have felt, how I felt about certain politics at the time. And she took something out of me, you know, and I don't know if that was anger, or if that was happiness, or if it was just all these emotions just came out, and the song was kind of done in an hour. And it's probably like my favorite song I've ever written, because it was able to touch on so many things, but in such a simple and accessible way. And just to the first line even being like, I don't need your permission. It's like, here I am. You know, it's no beating around the bush. It's like, it's like a fuck you song, basically, but also extremely empowering at the same time. And I don't think that I aimed for that just to be for women. I think there's a line in there that obviously, you know, a lot of women relate to. You came here through a woman, show some respect. I don't know, it's clearly influenced a lot of people. I definitely know that that line it's been used for people when they go out to do a political protest. They've used that line. Going to Bangladesh in my adult life, well, it just taught me so much about me and where I come from and where my family are from and the blood and the bloodline and generations and it's and the fact that I even got to have the opportunity to be a musician and my family are from there. You know, I'm from a village there, you know, and I don't know, it put a lot of things into perspective, and meeting members of family and talking to them about what they went through in the war, and I'm really interested in history and understanding and contextualizing my culture, because I think there's one thing wearing the dresses and eating the food, but there's another thing in the history and what my family have had to go through to get to where they are now. And I got to learn that firsthand and speak to so many people, and they were really willing to speak and be open just to me. Not that I was going to use that and capitalize off that, but it was important to have those conversations, and I think that the whole trip just grounded me. So when I got back to London, it was really easy to have perspective and take my writing somewhere else, you know. Long. Long? Yeah, and yeah, very long, and it was a real process. It was a real process. With that, and it was a lot of working by myself, then collaborating, then working with a mixer and putting these ideas together to get that EP. But it was good when it was done. I was like very relieved. I was like, phew, there's a lot of work. I wrote London Mine last year in April, and the Windrush scandal was on the news and had some awareness around it. And when I saw the treatment of the Windrush generation by our country, I was just like, fuck that. So I thought, I'm gonna try and say something and use my voice and make people realise that the thing for me that makes my city is all the different nationalities in the city. They are the most important things. And I think that needs to have more light, basically. Immigrants need to be appreciated more, and that was where that song came from. It's like bizarre. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like I'm just Joy Crookes. I come from a bedroom in South London. I don't really. Obviously I'm very grateful and they're very big names, but I think that it's very easy to compare female artists to other female artists, and they are so incredibly fantastic in their own respect, and they're very different artists, and I think I'm a very different artist, and yeah, I'm very grateful of those comments, but I want to get to the point where people say, oh, Joy Crookes is so Joy Crookes, you know. Yes, I want to make a great first album. I want to make a fantastic first album. I want to put power on my album. And I'm going to do shows, but yeah, an album. And I want to be able to be in the right headspace for an album. Maybe that's not the answer that you wanted, but yeah, I want to be prolific for the rest of the year and next year and release a sick album. You're watching Diffuse. Subscribe, like this channel to get more of this juicy, juicy content. My name's Joy Crookes, thank you for having me.